Hey guys, it's Matt. Before getting into this video, something happened in New York yesterday. I don't care to look at it. I'm not going to do that anymore. I did that. You know what my default is when things like this happen, yet the system wants to produce real copycat events. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I won't look at it. I study the underlying fabric of how reality works, its governing dynamics, what it tries to do to real people. I don't care to look at these presentations anymore, just so you know. In the video yesterday, somebody commented on that topic that I've discussed many times over the years, how something very good and very pure is allowed to be laid down or put forth into reality, and then what I call the Notnilc, or the dark part of reality, or the screen, then works to destroy it over time. And the comment was along the lines of, and I commented back, and I don't mean to insult the person. I called it first grade truth. It is first grade truth because it's the same old excuses that, no, Matt, when this happens in society, it's the politically correct that takes over, the woke professors and liberal left. And my Tony would say it's the communist influence. No, that's all first grade excuses. When the critical drinker presents a review of a movie, and then he says, and then they had to get into the message of woke, of diversity, all that. It's what's going on is far more complicated and far more sinister. That's what they want you to think. That the left wing is just invaded. No, no, no. The reality itself, the dark part of reality that is taken over here, that I call the Notnilc in the screen, has something is put into reality that's very pure, like this Robert Frost poem. That Matt, you're not going to review Two Roads, Two Roads to Virgin Woods. Yes, but this is fascinating. This is a study into reality itself. Trust me on this. This is absolutely incredible. This is not what it seems. Okay, it is not what it seems. The reality allows the pure. I don't think it can create the pure on its own. It needs a good person or a real spirit to do it, and then it works to destroy it. Ultimately, its goal is always the same: to hide people from understanding their true nature. We've looked at how this is done in movies and TV shows. We've never done it with a famous poem like this, but this is exactly how the reality does business. This is not going to take 5 minutes. Get to it. I got bit shoot to get. No, I'm not going to get to it. The people going forward here, they like to relax, sit back, ponder the big questions, open their minds. It takes a long time sometimes. This is the group we have going forward. I'm not going to get to it anymore. Get to it. I got to get to BitChute. It's not for you then. Okay, it's going to take a little while. This is fascinating. It is hard to begin this, so let me just explain in the most simplest sense what is going on here, what I believe is going on here. So most people here agree that the reality is out to destroy everything that was good or once good. Most of us agree. But we've never looked at it in this sense regarding something as simple or something considered as good as The Road Not Taken, Robert Frost. I chose the path that most people didn't take, and it's made all the difference. What could be simpler than that? Yet this review, and I found a couple other links. I haven't looked into it yet. This review takes something so simple and on purpose confuses it. It's misdirection. It's assigning meaning that's not there, confusing people. The person that wrote this, David Orr, in my opinion, they're conduits for the Notnilc, for the dark reality. They don't even know what they're doing. He's not sitting down in a sinister fashion saying, I'm going to confuse these people. He believes he's interpreting it correctly and creating the confusion. I mean, look at the tagline: on the many tricks and contradictions of The Road Not Taken. I'm going to show you the poem. I know you're rolling your eyes. You've all seen it, but it's so simple. There are not many tricks and contradictions in The Road Not Taken. And guys, this is reality itself operating, okay, at the fundamental metaphysical level. It's not some professor that's just going to try to do this. He's operating for the screen and Notnilc itself. Even something this simple, he's E, on behalf of the Notnilc, is out to, in a way, destroy, confuse. Matt, it's only one article by one guy. It's cumulative. The destruction, their patience is not human. They will take their time in the destruction of all things that were once good. This is incredible. Let me just show you what he's written here, how long this is. It's ridiculous. It's like the poem, my grandfather used to say, Jack Sprat could eat no fat. His wife could eat no lean. When they got together, they licked the platter clean. What if somebody presented a 4,000-page treatise on Jack Sprat could eat no fat? Would you think that that's normal? That's kind of where we are here. Okay, let me just dive into it. This is insane. Let me give you a glimpse to the scope and scale of this article by David Orr on a relatively simple poem. I mean, this thing is what I call an abomination of bloviation. An abomination of bloviation by David Orr. David, if you're listening, you should be ashamed of yourself, sir. Your parents are ashamed. I was going to say it's amazing you can have and hold a job, but you're the exact type of person that this system pushes to the forefront. Look at this. Goes on, I don't know, it's a couple thousand words. It goes on forever. David, the poem is relatively simple. There might be a few instances or opportunities for interpretation, but look at this. I don't know how many, a couple thousand words. It goes on. And when he's doing this, guys, he's rewriting the poem in several sections. He has the gall and arrogance to rewrite. He's rewriting the poem to coincide with different interpretations. And I'm sure on a lie detector he would say, I wouldn't think I could do better than Frost, but he does. He does. That's the gall of these people. Look at this. Did he do his master's thesis, 4,000 pages on Humpty Dumpty? How do you get all this out of Frost's simple poem? Look, he's rewriting these sections. Look at this. It's got to end soon. It's got to. Okay. There he is. David Orr. David Orr is the poetry columnist for the New York Times Book Review. Is anybody surprised? The New York Times, oh boy. He's a professor of some parts of the country say poetry. In Philly, we say poetry. He's a professor of poetry and the practice of criticism at Rutgers University. Poetry and the practice of criticism. Could you imagine the criticism if he would let me into class can I get a pass into class for a day? Just a day, David, please. You're a professor of practice of criticism. You should be able to take it. He's the winner of the Nona Balakinwood Citation for Excellence in Reviewing from the National Book Critics Circle Jerk and the Editor's Prize for Reviewing from Poetry Magazine. The Noana Balakian Citation. Is that supposed to be prestigious or something? David, that ain't no Pulitzer, my man. That ain't no Nobel Prize. It's probably something, if you present it prominently at Riza, you'll be solicited for Miragerone. That's a Star Trek reference. Also, it says he's a native of South Carolina or now lives in Princeton, New Jersey. Greg's folk, Greg is from South Carolina. Greg's folk, he didn't feel too comfortable down there amongst those good old boys, so he moved up north. He lives in Princeton for a reason. Okay, I'll share that with you. I never interviewed him, but he teaches at Rutgers. That's like the community college to somebody that goes to the Ivy League. He lives in Princeton, probably wakes up every morning and goes to the mailbox with a fantasy that there'll be a letter that the board of Princeton and John Nash want David to come work at Princeton in the Ivy League, and then someday he'll be awarded the pens, just like John Nash. Trust me, a guy like this does not want to stay at Rutgers. This is like the community college. He fantasizes, and Princeton isn't even good enough. He then fantasizes to someday get to Harvard. And then, I don't know, David, do a 40,000 word treatise on Humpty Dumpty and send it to Harvard and see what they think. I know you guys don't come here for me to read poetry to you. I'll be as quick as I can. It's only 2 images, 4 paragraphs, just this and one more, not even 2 minutes. You do have to be somewhat familiar with the poem. Many of you are, but it's been since high school for many, so I'll be quick. If you want to really look at it closely, because David's going to present all the different possible interpretations, then pause it here and pause it on the next image. It's very quick. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both, and be one traveler, long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other, as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear, though as for that the passing there had worn them really about the same. Okay, the paths were pretty similar, but this is the key line, because it was grassy and wanted wear. One had a little bit more grass, little less wear, little bit less taken. Last part of the poem. And both that morning equally lay in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day, yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh. Somewhere ages and ages hence, two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Now, this is David's article, and for anybody screaming at me from beneath the bubbles about this is a Mandela effect, the path not taken, or something along those lines, I hear you. I'm gonna try to address that a little bit. I'll keep it to a minimum for the triggered. It's not an anchor effect for me, but I absolutely hit into some Mandela issues while I was doing this research. No doubt about it. But let's leave that to a minimum and not trigger people. He says here, David, the road not taken has confused audiences literally from the beginning. Look, this is the first line of the article, which means he's out to confuse every poor sap that reads his dumbass article. No, David, the road not taken has not confused audiences in elementary schools and junior highs and high schools literally from the beginning. That's what you're out to do, you manipulated son of a bitch. Everybody takes away the same beautiful, positive message. It's like these roads were, they were kind of similar, and one was calling me, but this one, less traveled, less beaten down. And you know what? It's made all the difference in my life. I didn't follow the mainstream, didn't follow what everybody on CNN told me to do, and it has made all the difference. The message, why do you think the poem, if it wasn't Notnilc propped up and supported, why is it so famous? Because of that beautiful message, spiritual message, that is anti-Notnilc. The old guard doesn't need this, but just for anybody new, just give me a minute or two. Somebody might say, well, if it's such a pure message, why would the evil doers, why would they even allow it to come out? Because it's just we don't really understand why. The easiest way to say it, it's just contractually how this game works. The pure is allowed to come out, or it can't be, per the contractual arrangements, can't be prevented from coming out. This, Humpty Dumpty, the first three Star Wars versus the last three. Then once it's out and it's popped its head above the water, the Notnilc seems to be allowed to get its greasy, slimy Pelosi claws in there to destroy it once it's popped its head up out of the water, or maybe once it's noticed. So how this is or why, we'll never know, but this is just another example. But what's so fascinating about this example is you would say, there's no way that the message of this is so pure. Hey, look, I took the path less chosen. I didn't follow the mainstream, and it's made all the difference in my life. You could say, well, the Notnilc's going to try to destroy that. And even if you understood what we were talking about with the screen and the Notnilc, somebody years ago might say, how? How could they possibly destroy that? Like Humpty Dumpty. There is a beautiful message in Humpty Dumpty. That's why the reality must carry it through time. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. You had a great fall being in this existence from what you spiritually are now or were, or however you want to put it. And then do you look outward? Do you look outside yourself to put yourself back together? Do you look to the dumb, broke ass, all the king's horses and all the king's men? No, you look to yourself. Humpty, that dumbass, needed to put himself back together. So it seems like the nursery rhymes, it seems, are so small and so there's no other room to manipulate it. And you would think, and one would think, that this Robert Frost poem is so simple. How could anybody get in there and try to make a confusing subject out of it, but yet it's being done here. That's what's so fascinating. And David Orr, look, you could put him on a lie detector test. He would believe there are multiple interpretations. He would believe he's just working for you. He'd believe he's doing the best he can. He doesn't have any idea how he is working or doing exactly what the system wants to destroy the originally pure. The article, to me, almost plays psychological games. It starts off by saying, let me just look at what I highlighted. The sequence of their correspondence on the poem is a miniature version of the confusion the road not taken would provoke in millions of subsequent readers. So that simple poem I read, David says, is going to provoke confusion in millions of people. Gets into this whole back and forth between his friend Thomas and who was another famous person in literature, and they would take walks together and all this back and forth correspondence. And number one, Frost sends the poem to Thomas with no clarifying text in March or April of 1915. Two, Thomas responds shortly thereafter. So this person did that, and then the reader thinks, wow, there's a whole historical narrative that this was taking place between Thomas and his friend Robert Frost, and it's all historically documented, so there must really be something to what this person's about to present. It's all bullcrap, in my opinion. I don't care if there was these letters back and forth between Robert Frost and his friends. It's being used to introduce the confusion and to validate the confusion that will later come in this abomination of bloviation. Let's continue to the next set of nonsense. Edward Thomas was one of the keenest literary thinkers of the time, blah, blah, blah. I highlighted, yet even Thomas needed explicit instructions. He was one of the top minds in literature. He couldn't figure out what the fucking thing said. He needed instructions, indeed 6 letters, in order to appreciate the series of double games played in The Road Not Taken. No, David, you're playing doubled games. I got to stop yelling at David. What else did I highlight? Poet critic Robert Graves, who came to the somewhat baffling conclusion that the poem had to do with Frost's agonizing decision not to enlist in the British Army. Okay, well that's okay. If somebody's saying, I think Robert Frost, if you read between the lines, the path not taken, he was going to enlist in the British Army. That's fine, because that's not. You might be trying to determine a very quiet or behind the scenes intention, but that's not destroying or out to destroy how those that would read this in high school and college would take away from it. So that type of interpretation's fine. Okay, for this image and only this image, there is a warning and a disclaimer for the Mandela effect triggered. I'm only going to talk about it for a few minutes. Try to stick with me just for this image. I won't ever mention it once we get off this image. It's a warning, an alert. It's like what Schwarzenegger said in True Lies, a bright boy alert. We have a bright boy alert. I'll only be a few minutes. All right, starting at the top. The difficulty with The Road Not Taken starts approximately enough with its title. What? Yeah, he keeps reiterating how problematic and confusing the title is. This is 3 times now. The title couldn't be any simpler, but let's go on to what I highlighted. Again, the end of the poem up top is that 2 roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and it has made all the difference. Yeah, it's very hard to interpret that. Yeah, the part that's highlighted, so vivid is that image, the end of the poem, that many readers simply assume that the poem is called The Road Less Traveled, or The Path Not Taken. Okay, there's confusion on both. And again, guys, it's not a Mandela effect anchor for me, but it is strange to me that I never can remember the title of this poem. It's called The Road Not Taken. How hard is that to remember when we've been looking at it since 9th grade literature class? Never can get it right. It also doesn't make any sense. There is no road in the poem. There is no road in the poem. There are paths. So many people, and let me just continue reading. The road, they assume it's called The Road Less Traveled. Search engine data indicates that searches for Frost and The Road Less Traveled are extremely common, and even accomplished critics routinely refer to the poem by its most famous line. For example, in an otherwise penetrating essay on Frost's ability to say 2 things at once, he's not saying 2 things at once. Catherine Schultz, The book reviewer for, oh, here we go again, the New York Magazine mistakenly called the poem The Road Less Traveled. And then, in an irony Frost might have savored, describes it as not very frosty. Well, this to me absolutely could be Mandela effect residual. We've seen this thousands of times now, guys, regarding things that we believe are Mandela effects. Major reviewers at New York Magazine, when they're reviewing the poem and citing one of the most famous poems in history, don't get the name wrong. Now, this type of evidence, this type of residual, doesn't convince those that are not affected. And, of course, one incidence is not an adequate sample size, but this is the sort of thing that happens. So we have this, my own personal recollection. I never can get the title right. And then I'm not going to mention the specifics of what happened, but as I was doing this research or looking at this morning, it seemed, I'm not kidding you, in the Mandela effect, and know what I'm talking about, it seemed like there were sections I researched regarding this topic that when I went back to look at, it was not as I remembered it even a few minutes before. It happened a few times, nothing I can really point my finger at, but if anybody were to come forth and say this is a Mandela effect, I would absolutely believe them. I can't put it in the anchor category. Let's move on. How many people have we already lost? Next section of David's treatise on the most simple poem of all time. I'll just read the highlighted, then we'll talk about it on the back end. I won't stop anymore. The title isn't about what he did, it's about what he didn't do. Or is it? Which road, after all, is the road not taken? Is it the one the speaker takes, which, according to his last description of it, is less traveled? That is to say, not taken by others? Or does the title refer to the supposedly better traveled road that the speaker himself fails to take? Precisely who is not doing the taking? Could you jam in? We're not even close to done looking at the screenshots, guys. Could you jam in any more intentional confusion about this poem? Any more nonsense? This David guy. David, thou art a villain. If you believe, if you're totally mind controlled and believing he's actually trying to help, then you shouldn't use the word villain. If it's an intentional deception, thou art a villain. But this is ridiculous. The title isn't about what he did, it's about what he didn't do. The road not taken. Well, yeah, okay. Leave the Mandela effect aside. Yeah, the road not taken. He didn't take it. But the last two lines is like he didn't do what the mainstream called for him to do. Like, what's the point of even what you're doing here if not out to confuse? Let's just move on. This frame is unbelievable. I'm going to read the whole thing, not just the highlighted. I mean, this is you would think he couldn't get any lower in terms of what is trying to be done here. I call this a Fiddle and Ben's a Fiddle and Ben's presentation from Gangs of New York. Fiddle and Ben's is low. It's like a man to steal anything. This is a Fiddle and Ben's presentation. Reading from the top, more than that, Frost wanted to juxtapose two visions, two possible poems, you might say, at the very beginning of his lyric. What? The first is the poem that readers think of as The Road Less Traveled. Yeah, they think of it as The Road Less Traveled because that's what it was in the old dimension, but let's just continue. In which the speaker is, in that one, the one you remembered in the pure reality, the speaker is quietly congratulating him. Why is Khan not attached to gratulating? He's quietly congratulating himself for taking an uncommon path, that is, the path not taken by others. Yeah, that's what most people in high school think. The second is the parodic poem that Frost himself claimed to have originally had in mind, in which the dominant tone is one of self-dramatizing regret over the path not taken by the speaker. You've got to be kidding me. These two potential poems revolve around each other, separating and overlapping like clouds in a way that leaves neither reading perfectly visible. Are you kidding me? Guys, this is incredible. It's literally finding things. I mean, maybe we're in a separate reality than this guy. He's finding stuff that's just not there. The second poem, in this reality, somehow Frost himself claims he had the other meaning in mind. So Frost lived to almost 1960 or something like that. So he let millions and millions of high school classrooms analyze it wrong. We just sat back and did nothing because it says here Frost himself claims he had the other meaning in mind. You got to be kidding me. This is what's the difference? Reality breakdown, Mandela effect. It's all the same thing. It's all the same stew. Let's just move on. Next slide. But this depends on what you think the road not taken is trying to say. If you believe the poem is meant to take a position on will, agency, the nature of choice, and so forth, as the majority of readers have assumed, then it can seem unsatisfying. At best, a kind of joke, as Schulz puts it. But if you think of the poem not as stating various viewpoints, but rather as performing them, setting them beside and against one another, then a very different reading emerges. Here it's helpful, as it is so often the case, to call upon a 19th century magician in The Elements of Logic. Richard Whately describes the fallacy of substitution like so. I don't need to refer to a book called The Elements of Logic to interpret Frost's poem, whether the title's Mandela affected or not. And look at this bullshit. It just gets more. You would think there's no way it could get worse. It just keeps coming. Two distinct objects may, by being dexterously presented again and again in quick succession to the mind of the cursory reader, be so associated together in his thoughts as to be capable of being actually combined in practice. The fallacious belief thus indeed bears a striking resemblance to the optical illusion effected by the ingenious and philosophical toy called a thaumatrope. I guess he's quoting, okay, fine, that's not from David. He's quoting from this logic book. But is it really appropriate to pull out this mumbo jumbo nonsense from a logic book in determining what Frost is trying to do in 4 fucking stanzas? Next image. Two things are worth pausing over in these stanzas. First, why is the physical appearance of the roads mentioned in the first place? We typically worry more about where roads go than what they look like. This jerk, David, is questioning the basic motivation. It's basically be like saying it's literally no different than this. Why did they put Humpty Dumpty on a wall? Like, why would they choose the wall? And why most people that talk about a wall will tell you if it's brick or stone or hemp. They don't mention what the wall was. It's no different than that. This is insane. Down to the bottom. Second, if you're determined to make the appearance of the roads the central issue, why make the appearance solely a function of how much travel each road has received? Why not talk about one road was sunnier or wider it's exactly what I just said. I didn't read that yet. I guess I'd read it when I highlighted this an hour and a half ago, but it's exactly what I said about the Humpty Dumpty wall. Guys, okay, I don't know how much this just goes on and on and on. You get the point. It is absolutely, we've already passed the insane threshold. Let's not do too much more. Okay, no more reading. I will show you a few more. This is a new screen, a few more screens from this ridiculous article. If anybody wants to read it, I'll leave it up, but I'm not going to read from it anymore. I'll just present my conclusions. Guys, I'll start with the most controversial conclusion first. I do believe this. I'm not going to put it as an anchor effect that I know has changed. My 5 or 6 or 7 or whatever anchors I know existed differently in my past. 100%. I'm not going to put this here. But I do believe it is a Mandela effect of some kind. If you Google search the path less traveled or the path not taken, it comes up, comes right up. Probably if you look, or they were, showing you all the search results, we had access to everything that they have, probably searched for more in that way. I believe it is a Mandela effect for a few reasons, including a few weird things that happened to me this morning. So we'll just leave it at that. Okay, let's move on. Number 2 is where we will agree, more of us will agree, that to me, this absolutely is another example, a different type of example, and different from anything we've looked at in the past, of, we call dark reality, Notnilc, the screen, whatever works through its minions. It works through people on its frequency. It works through people taking the download mechanisms and technologies we don't understand. It is another example of Notnilc trying to destroy something, I was going to say, that was once good. It's still good. But see, it's very patient in its destruction. It kills through 1,000 paper cuts and 1,000 pinpricks. It takes a bunch of tiny little bites. So yeah, I can hear you. Anybody saying, this is just one article written by one nutty professor about one poem. Again, they take tiny bites. It's cumulative. Have you looked at this as long as I have across all these different examples over many years? Of course, my focus has been on movies, but too much on movies. How much is it working in areas like this? Is it just one nutty professor who is Sherman Klump, the Klumps doing? Is just acting on it, or is it part of something bigger? To me, it absolutely is part of something bigger. If you've been looking at this stuff as long as I have, what a coincidence. And I should have looked at some of the other links, but I didn't. I know there was another link that said people are misinterpreting. It wasn't just this link, but look, is it all over the place? Is it as in your face as the last three Star Wars, obviously ruined on purpose? No, it's not that in your face. But this Notnilc screen is very patient in how it does business. But the way I see it is like, oh, what a coincidence that how many poems do people generally remember from high school? Like 2 or 3 or 4. This is one of them. And the message, unlike that other mumbo jumbo that we read in high school and all that, one of my teachers in high school was a Mensa Society, which is, shouldn't he know on his own he's smart? He has to go seek some sort of plaque from somebody saying he's smart. People that are smart kind of know that on their own. They don't need no plaque. So he was at Mensa. All this mumbo jumbo we went over in high school, couldn't understand none of it. Like, was it Doyle? Doyle says about the Bible and Sling Blade. He says, this one begot that one, that begot this one. I don't understand none of it, Carl. You know what I do for a living, Carl? I work construction. You know how important that is to the world, Carl? So my teacher presented a bunch of crap, and like the only thing I remember is 2 past diversion. It also says at the top, doesn't it say yellow wood? Is that pissed on breadcrumbs? Yellow wood? Anyway, that's all I remember. And I remember the meaning. Hey, don't follow what CNN tells you to do. Do your own thing. Find your own path. It's one of the only poems we remember, unless you're into all that mumbo jumbo that the teachers presented, and it's being taken down. And the person that wrote this, or obviously they think they're just trying to help, but whatever this is trying to do here, they don't expect to accomplish it overnight, as quickly as they ruined Star Wars. It's done with inhuman patience. And to close, one last note about the Mandela effect, thing that I pointed out probably in mid or late 2016, the Mandela effect always produces an inferior result. No one's ever shown me where this new change mat improved it. It's always worse than what it was. I noticed that going back to 2016 regarding the Mandela effect. You're going to need a bigger boat. It just doesn't make any sense at all. If you build it, he will come. Makes no sense. People cling to the little catch with his father. No, it makes no sense, but I don't want to get into that. This makes no sense. The road less traveled. It's not a road. There's no road in the poem at all. Well, Matt, what do you think they had back then? No, it doesn't at all relate to a road. It talks about grass, and it talks about leaves that are not as, I don't know how it's put exactly, trodden down from footsteps. Footsteps. Okay? You would not, I agree in 1650, the road to Sterling or whatever, you put the carts but that's for carts and horses and donkeys and jackasses. The road to Sterling, you put your meats and cheeses and take it up to Sterling for William Wallace. That's for carts and horses, what was called a road. In no way talks about it like that. Paths through the woods, people walking their dogs at best, would never be called a road. This follows along with the Mandela effect quite a bit, because Mandela affected people find results that make no sense. So here we have it again. One of the great poetic minds of all time. He wouldn't have chosen path in the title. He wouldn't have chosen something. He chose road, and not one word in his poem references a road. Stuff happens all the time with the Mandela effect. An anchor effect for me, it does seem trivial. Interview with a vampire, interview with the vampire. Oh, well, that's all trivial stuff. No, it's not, but this does seem trivial. But I know in my reality it was a vampire, okay, 100%. But, it isn't trivial because the author would never make that mistake. Anne Rice, whatever that little actor was in the movie, he didn't have an interview with the vampire. The implies one, or the top guy, if no one else is even close. The singer of all time, even though there's more than one singer, the king, Elvis. It applies one or the absolute top. No, he had an interview with Louis. Louis was just some regular vampire amongst many. It wasn't just Tom Cruise. There was that whole, not that there's anything wrong with it, coven with Antonio Banderas and all. There were tons of vampires. So you would never, as a smart person, you would never title it Interview with the Vampire. I think Anne Rice knows the singular meaning of the versus a, which is a, there's you're interviewing one among many. This happens over and over again with the Mandela effect. And Mandela effect triggered, or people that just don't see it. Just every all these we have thousands of these examples almost at this point, depending where you're Mandela affected. Again, we only have maybe 5 to 10 things that we really latch onto for ourselves, but we all have similar stories. How the change we saw made makes no sense.